Alright, let's talk about a couple of completely different new releases. One that came out at Thanksgiving, and then I honestly don't even recall when Disenchanted came out. And I feel like it should be a much bigger deal than it is, but then I saw the quality of the movie, and I guess I kind of get the whole straight to streaming thing, and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, this is coming out also. Maybe the marketing was big and I just never really saw any of it, but it sadly seems appropriate. But before we go into that, I actually want to start with Bones and All, which I wasn't really sure how I was going into this because I did know that it was based on a book and that it was like a love story based around cannibalism and how interesting of an idea that was, and the fact that it was Luca Guadagnino's new movie and him reteaming with Chalamet after Call Me by Your Name. And though I missed his Suspiria remake somehow, I did also love A Bigger Splash by him a lot. So that going into a cannibalism love story was intriguing, but weirdly enough, is attention grabbing as that is, the thing that really got my attention and made me want to see this was when I saw a full cast list. And I saw like Mark Rylance and Michael Stuhlbarg and stuff like that were in it, and Andre Holland. And Stuhlbarg, who was so great in Call Me by Your Name, reteaming with Guadagnino as well, and now for a totally opposite part here. Um, yeah, and I wasn't really that familiar with Taylor Russell. I still haven't seen Waves yet either. Somehow in that area I got really behind and I never came back to it. But all this stuff makes me want to seek out the things that I've missed, like the Suspiria remake or Waves or whatever, because everybody here is like at the top of what they're doing. So I like how when it starts off, another aspect here is a Reznor and Roth score. But interestingly enough, the first thing I noticed that I liked about this movie was how the opening scenes don't really have much score. Like when she's just kind of, going from place to place or walking to her friend's house or whatever, they just kind of let it be silent and they kind of let the surrounding noise kind of speak for itself. And I think that's going to be important to kind of establish what's going on because of how natural everything will feel as it kind of turns into this bizarre sort of road trip movie as it goes on. Like when we hit the road trip aspect, it reminded me of two different movies, and when I say different, I mean really, really different. And just not really a specific movie in general, but like Kelly Reichardt movies were coming to mind when I thought about when I was watching, the road trip aspect and how it kind of showed the relationship between Taylor Russell and Chalamet, like kind of slowly building throughout. I think it was her debut movie, River of Grass. That was the movie that kind of kept coming to mind. That this kind of reminded me of in a really good way, where it was that thing where it's like the sort of naturalness to the environment around them, kind of being this own thing in its scenes and setting the scene without the movie necessarily having to do much else, and how the cinematography does it and the way they interact. Like, despite that we're in this sort of heightened reality where cannibalism is something that just kind of exists and there's nothing you can do about it, there was something that felt very real about all the characters and their interactions. Even people like Mark Rylance, who definitely feel like they kind of live in a heightened reality, somehow feels like really grounded and like somebody you could just kind of casually run into. Like there's people you can run into that just sort of give you these creepy bad vibes immediately, and you're not quite sure what's off about them. That's something that Rylance especially really perfects here, and I also like the way that they don't really explicitly set the time period. At least I didn't catch it if they did, but they just kind of put in these clues that make me think we're somewhere in the 80s, because we get like there's a TV that's playing like Giuliani's on TV and he looks like surprisingly young. There's people just kind of smoking indoors constantly. There's a complete absence of cell phones, and it's like that just kind of weaves itself in here and kind of sets the tone without having to do it like really blatantly. Because a lot of times when movies kind of set themselves like in the 80s or something, they like you can tell they'll like throw in lines or specific references or something that are like really like almost like making jokes about the fact that they're in a different setting. And so I like how this one just does it so without being in your face about anything. Because that's pretty much the way this movie treats everything. Is there's a lot of stuff here to take in, but none of it feels like it's being like thrown in our faces or we're being forced to recognize it or acknowledge it or whatever. And I think that it's just the way the movie goes. The second movie that I was gonna compare this to also was, I don't know how many people know the existence of this. It's a movie from like 1990, I think, called Baby Blood, where a woman is pregnant with like this sort of creature that has to feed on blood, and she goes from place to place and location to location, kind of like we do here, over the span of months. And that was so it was kind of reminded me of like if Kelly Reichardt had made Baby Blood is basically what this movie felt like to me, and I love that, like like taking that into account, that equation. I love that this movie exists and that it's the kind of movie that it is, and it was treated the way that it is, like by a director like Guadagnino, who felt pretty perfect. It seems almost like it'd be pretty random, but it does turn out that he is actually kind of perfect for this. But talking about that Reznor and Ross score, when it does start to come in, are moments like when Rylance first shows up and he's like luring serious sort of stranger danger vibes. When Mark Rylance appears the first time, and he's like literally luring Taylor Russell's character to a house, and the way he just sort of the way he's dressed, the way he just sort of comes out of the night, and there's kind of a reveal that he had, like, it's like, here's the thing, is the way he's dressed is he's wearing a hat with a giant feather in it, very sort of, Peter Pan-esque, which makes sense, luring, people who are I guess she's just barely past a child, I guess you could say, but it still feels very much like the young being lured in by the experienced in this really uncomfortable way. But he's also got this really long braid down his back, and it's like the big feather in his hat and the braid has its own dramatic reveal to kind of show, just like, it's almost like it's this way of saying, like, the way he looks from the distance, because that's when we first see him, where he's like slowly walking up to her, but we're kind of more in her perspective, and then it's like this sort of way of saying, like, it's those kind of people where as they come forward and you start to notice more details about them, the more uncomfortable you get. But still, he's soft-spoken Mark Rylance. He's got that sort of warm, comforting voice. So you're really not quite sure how to take it at first. And you can imagine how she feels also in that same way. And then once she's in the house with him, like I said, the way this just sort of builds up, and you definitely feel like you're in this sort of out of place thing, and you don't really know if you can trust anybody. Certainly don't know if you can trust this guy or not. Especially since the first thing he reveals is that he also has this cannibalism thing that she does. So this is like the first time she can really connect with somebody. This is obviously after her father has abandoned her. And so, yeah, and you'd think, now that, Andre Holland has abandoned her, and then this is the first person she finds is this older person that can relate to her, this could either be a father figure of sorts and somebody that she could latch on to, somebody that's going to kind of show her the way, or not. Or it could be somebody very dangerous and very threatening. And yeah, and then this is the first scene where we see somebody consumed. And the way this is treated, it was really, really built up to me, in some of the places I looked around, where the movie being really, really disgusting, like especially with sound. And so I was concerned going into it, with that movie theater sound, and knowing what it is I was expecting to happen in this movie. But I don't know if it was just all the build-up, but it ended up not being that bad to me. I think I just set myself up for the worst. And I was also thinking back to, like, Cannibal Holocaust or something. How there's, there's one particular scene of all the shit that happens, and the animal cruelty aside, because that's obviously the hardest thing to watch, but there's a moment in Cannibal Holocaust that just really engraved itself in my head, and I hate it forever. And I haven't even watched the movie in over 15 years, probably, but this is still in there. Where one of the cannibals has a hold of like somebody's hand, and they're just eating the meat off of the fingers, and we're like seeing it in full. That's the kind of thing I was kind of expecting going into this, so I was really relieved to find that most of the actual cannibalism is off screen, and really really well done in that sense. Like you really get a sense of what is happening exactly, but we see so surprisingly little of it. We get glimpses for sure of like teeth on skin pulling away contact, but they're very rare and they're very brief. Most of the actual cannibalism itself is just kind of implied, and through the sound. But there's one thing they do in this first scene when this first person is being consumed is that the camera starts to linger on pictures of this person when they were alive instead of focusing on that. Like I said, we still get the sound and we know what's happening during this, but there's something sort of like human about that, where like they just like the movie chooses to like sort of honor the person by showing them in their life, like showing pictures that you would see at a funeral, as this is happening. And with that being the first time we really get a look at cannibalism. She gets a taste of it like at the very beginning, but this is like the first full on scene. And there's also like aftermath stuff like that. There's this great moment with Rylance where you get the sense of how long he's been doing this and how just an integral part of his life it is. Where he's got like a piece of this person hanging off of his face or his mouth, and he goes over to the couch and he's pretty much done. So he's over here at the couch now, and this piece drops off of him and lands on the couch. And there's this split second where you see him debate if he's gonna pick it up and eat it or not. And it's like stuff like that. Stuff like that shows me also Rylance's experience as an actor. Like when I see stuff like that, it makes me think those were Rylance moments. Like he wasn't directed to do that. Is the vibe that I get from it, and it feels so much like a natural thing with this character. And that's the thing also is you get how perceptive Mark Rylance's character Sully is throughout it also, and that's something that can be kind of scary when somebody's like has a threatening vibe to them and they're super super perceptive, and he knows like exactly what's going on in her life without her having said anything about herself. There's that kind of thing. There's another choice that Rylance makes later also, where he's standing by his van by like kind of a busy road, and when a car goes by, we see him like kind of turn away and like face the van so like he can't be seen. And it's like that's something that doesn't really like the reason he wouldn't want to be seen doesn't really come up much. Like there is the whole idea of them sort of being like the cannibals being like nomads as they go to kind of I guess avoid being caught. But there's a very sort of let the right one in vibe in the opening scenes with her and Andre Holland as her dad. So you do get the sense that there's this constant fleeing every time it happens. But yeah, just those little choices are something that I was really enjoying picking up on as they went. And yeah, and another thing they kind of show the gross factor without showing the gross factor is you sort of get the sense when people are like covered in blood afterwards, like the stickiness of it. Like there's a lot of flies around in the scenes like this, and it's like that's a detail that's so disgusting you love it because it feels it feels weirdly real, and sets these scenes like I said would otherwise feel like they're in a heightened reality. Only serve to make the environment feel even more grounded and real, which is wild. And there's also these moments where there's like dream sequences. And while sometimes where I feel like this might be over the top, they're handled so well here because they really give you that sense of like when you're falling asleep but you're not in like a deep sleep, and there's those like kind of they may not even be dreams, they may just be kind of visions that you're like falling through. And it's like that's something that they really managed to capture like on film that I find really impressive. Also, to capture that feeling of sort of not being asleep and dreaming, but like falling asleep as the visions start to appear, and that was really wild as well. um, and yeah, so at the center of this, all of this madness, there is this coming of age love story between Chalamet and Russell. And it's one of those cases where it gets so convincing to a point, and it feels so much like a coming of age movie to a point that I never forgot it was a cannibalism movie, but I could see people briefly forgetting that it's a cannibalism movie when you get wrapped up enough in this story of just these two young lovers that are going from one place to the other, trying to get to a specific destination, because she's trying to track down her mom, to see if there's anything to find out or any connection or just anything in general. Any reason you have a searching for the lost parent movie is here, but that has a payoff in itself, that's really big and potentially unexpected. And of course, they're going to meet people along the way. Like we already have, the meeting with Rylance at the start, and then we go from person to person, potentially victim to victim. And then at some point, they run into Michael Stuhlbarg, and David Gordon Green is with him, as in the director David Gordon Green. And they have this scene around a campfire. And like I said, the thing I love the most about this, I think, is regardless of Rylance and how amazing he is here, I think I found Stuhlbarg to be the most unsettling character. And I don't know if it's just because you think back to the last time you worked with Guadagnino and how warm his character was in Call Me By Your Name. And like to think that this is their next collaboration. And like I said, it's his appearance, it's the way he talks, it's the way he approaches their similarities between them. There's just something deeply unsettling about this character, and there's even a moment that almost feels horror movie like, where he runs towards the camera. But it's one of those things is you can see him running, like in this moment that he's running towards them. But there's like one shot where it takes a while, it takes longer to cut away than you think it will while he's running towards the camera. And it like really, keep in mind also, I'm the only one in the theater. Apparently this movie's box office wasn't that great, unfortunately, but I could just, like I mentioned before, I could just imagine like executives laughing to themselves, like, wouldn't it be funny if we put a cannibalism movie out on Thanksgiving? And then it didn't occur to them maybe that wasn't the best choice. But yeah, there were, sort of horror elements in this also that are unsettling in that sense. But like I said, without being too over the top. Like it actually feels like, it doesn't even feel like necessarily a nightmarish kind of sequence or anything like that. It feels like you're being pursued like them by this Michael Stuhlbarg character, and it's just really chilling. And like I said, when a movie does it well, I kind of tend to love that feeling. So I think that's all I can really say without going into anything else that's like too revealing. But yeah, I love how this is a movie about cannibalism and a coming of age love story that also feels like extremely artful. Like I said, I was those Kelly Reichardt comparisons I couldn't get enough of because I love most of her movies, and the way they just sort of set you into this natural setting. And I feel like Guadagnino did that in his own way. Like I don't want it to sound like it's too much like these other movies, because it's not. But it's, like I said, while it feels like a combination of River of Grass and Baby Blood and stuff like that, it also feels like its own very unique thing that we haven't really seen much of before. And I like the fact that it's crazy to me that this was a wide release, and this was in like almost every theater, it feels like. Because it kind of bothers me that it didn't do as well box office wise, because the fact that this kind of movie is out there for, if you'll forgive the expression, mass consumption, it's, yeah, like I said, it puts you in the idea of these particular genres, but just feels so unique in itself. This is something I would have liked large masses of people to have seen, But I feel like probably on streaming this will be one of those movies that finds a new life when people start getting like more access to it. And it's like it's just there and it's only a click away, and I feel like that's when people will find it. But I'm really glad I saw it in the theater to really sort of take in that natural vibe of it and that feeling of how much it feels like it's in the real world. Um, so yes, that was very satisfying. So let's go the other way from satisfying and go into Disenchanted. And if you haven't seen Enchanted since it came out in 2007, this movie will give you a helpful recap. And they gives you the whole thing of after they recap the whole first movie, they say, and then they, lived happily ever after, or did they? No, this is after happily ever after. And no, sadly, this isn't Into the Woods and, starts off happy and ends in death or anything like that. It's okay. So I went ahead and rewatched the first Enchanted before I watched this because it had been a long time. I think the last time I rewatched Enchanted was probably when I did the Cinderella verses with it, and I think that was like maybe 7 years ago. So it's like, okay, maybe I need to refresh my memory on this. Not real. I should have known there was gonna be a fucking recap, but. Uh, so I rewatched the original, and I liked it when it first came out, and I liked it again, and yeah, so this was probably my third time seeing it. And I like it enough to where I'm surprised I haven't seen it more times because I do really like the first movie, um, and I remember really liking. I remember loving Amy Adams. Like that's the movie where you like really fall in love with Amy Adams, as I did at like 16 or 17. Um, this time around, when I was watching the first movie, I did get the sense that her performance is maybe a little too cutesy. Like I get the idea that she's supposed to be from this, like from the animated classic Disney movies, and she's coming into the real world. So of course she's gonna seem sort of the whole point, the whole joke, is that she's so overly contrasting to her environment when she's in the real world. But here I did sort of miss that quality. And it shows you just how well she found it in the original movie. So, but here's the thing though, is that we're really far past the original movie now. I think it's supposed to be only like 10 years or something after, even though it's been longer, since it's been 15 years since the original came out. But we still have Giselle in places where, like, because obviously Morgan's going to be a teenager now. You can imagine where that goes. Um, and so she's using sarcasm and stuff like that, and Giselle's like, talks with her, like, there's a joke where she's, like, learning sarcasm, where, like, she's slowly starting to be able to detect sarcasm. And it's like, Giselle's been in the real world now for 10 years. Like, I get, that where she comes from, but still, it does feel like she should be sort of more integrated into the real world by now. You would think, but we still kind of got to use those jokes of, oh, she's from another place, but now she's here, and it's like, okay, I guess we didn't pass that in a decade, but okay. Um, and that was the thing, too, was I was wondering for a while how many years were supposed to have passed, because the first thing you'll notice is that I actually had to look up if this was the original Morgan actress or not, and it's not. But apparently, the original Morgan actress has a cameo in it. I don't think I saw her, but I think she was supposed to be in one of the town scenes or something. And my first thought was it was confusing because it was like it felt like so much time had passed, but then it was also like, but Giselle's still not completely adapted apparently. And it's like, I don't know why they recast Morgan, and it's like, so is the other actress, does she look too old? Or what? I don't know. So, it's like when they didn't bother to cast, they cast Malcolm Monroe instead of just bringing Mae Whitman back for that shitty Independence Day movie, but maybe they were just sparing her. But I'll try not to get too sidetracked like that, talking about Disenchanted, but I'm gonna want to get sidetracked because I'm not a fan of this. Just right away, also, there's another sin the movie commits, which is, and I know Morgan's supposed to be the rebellious teenager now. We're saying, talking about, like, oh, Giselle, she's so embarrassing, she does so many embarrassing things, and you're not my mother, and stuff like that. having a pointless love interest that doesn't really go anywhere. She meets a guy, and it's clear this is going to be like her Prince Charming, and it's like, oh, I can't wait to not give a fuck about this. And this whole chunk of the movie that gets devoted to this. And then they just kind of seem to forget about that. They're like he's there in Prince Charming mode at the end while she's in distress, but he's not really that present, and then at the end they're sitting at a picnic table looking happy. That's about it. I don't even know why we needed that, but there that is. But because Morgan's also a rebellious teenager, we get a moment where a song starts to kick in at the beginning. And she says, does anyone ever just say stuff? As if to say, oh, I'm stuck in this musical. And I find that really funny because Lin-Manuel Miranda was just on the Always Sunny podcast talking about how much he hates it when musicals are afraid to be musicals without being self-referential. When they have to say, like, oh, how, oh, it's so ridiculous we're singing because we're in a musical. And I love the fact that just when you hear the guy that created Hamilton and In the Heights say that, this movie comes out and just says that right away through one of its characters, and it's like you immediately feel like this movie's not gonna feel good. It's certainly not feel good in the way that the first movie does. So yeah, then they leave and they move into this house, and this is one of those cases also where I can't even tell what they're trying to do because they're in this big house. It's like a layered house. It's got this really big yard, and apparently this is seen as a bad house. Like it's seen as oh, we're going to have to really work on this place. And I honestly cannot tell if that's a joke or if it's completely detached writers and filmmakers. It could be either one at this point. Because we do have a villain of sorts who is unsurprisingly, one of the most unsurprising casting choices of all time, is played by Maya Rudolph, who's kind of filling in for Susan Sarandon here. Susan Sarandon, who was amazing in the first movie. I'd forgotten how much I loved her in the first movie. Even with her limited screen time, she's like one of my main takeaways from the first movie, is Susan Sarandon. Because that's what you can do. Like, that's the power that Disney villains have. Like, there's villains and there's Disney villains, and they're definitely in their own camp, and amazing in their own way, and memorable in their own way. More often than not, might be the most memorable aspect of their movies. And Maya Rudolph's just kind of here. It feels like she's not even in the movie very much, but we're supposed to see her as the big bad villain or whatever. And Yvette Nicole Brown and Jayma Mays are like her sort of minions who are just kind of here to make comments. They're people, the two of them, they're more talented than these roles are going to give them for sure. And most of the people in this movie are going to feel this way. James Marsden is here, who's still great. He and Idina Menzel are playing their same characters, and they come out of the animated world. For a little bit, I feel like Marsden was probably busy doing other things because he's really barely in this, which sucks because I feel like he's the only carryover from the first movie that I loved just as much as I did in the first movie. Where like he's still great, but like I said, it feels like he's barely here, so that was a downer. Menzel, they're taking more advantage of now than they did in the first movie because in the first movie, she didn't really get much to do, and she didn't get to kind of show off her talent. Well, here she gets a song, and to give you an idea of how they utilize her, they give her a big song towards the end, and there is a lyric, if I heard it correctly, and this isn't like a self-referential song, this is a big, serious song. This is the big emotional turning point into the climax song. No self-awareness whatsoever. They give Menzel the lyric to sing, "Let it grow, let it glow." Like I said, they're being totally serious about it. It's not like some inside reference or anything, or hey, look at this, remember this. That's what, and I just immediately, I got this, and I hate getting this cynical about it, especially since the cynicism of Disney being so corporate is so played out at this point. And it's like, yes, we get it. They're a gigantic corporation and they like money. But I mean, seriously, when I hear Menzel singing a new song where the lyric is "Let it grow, let it glow," all I can hear is like them saying, "Let's put them into the mindset that this is a great song." Because it's going to immediately make them think of that other song that she sang. And that's it just doesn't. It just feels gross, honestly. Because that's the way the songs are in this movie. There's not a single memorable one. We were talking about Disney villains, and one of the best things about Disney villains is their songs. They all have like their big villain song. Once again, usually one of the most memorable songs in the movies, or some of the most memorable songs in the movies. And because of the plot that is now turned, Giselle is going back and forth under a spell between being Giselle and being an evil stepmother, because she's technically Morgan's stepmother, which there is a clever plot in there. There's a clever idea in there. You know, the fact that Giselle is now a stepmother for real, to put her in danger of being the evil one. But this is not handled very well. And one of the ways this is not handled very well is the villain song in this movie is a double villain song, because we have Giselle, who's kind of, bouncing back and forth, but then we have Maya Rudolph, and it's like a battling villains sort of song. And it's like, I can just feel what this is supposed to feel like. Like, I can imagine what this is supposed to feel like, and how this could have been the big number of the movie, and the one that really takes away. Like, this would have been the moment where I said, I don't like any of the other songs in the movie, but this one really worked. But I can't say that, because it's not even that level. Because the first thing is that Giselle is never convincingly bad. That's the first thing. And then the other thing is the fact that, like I've said, I feel like we've barely even seen Maya Rudolph at this point. So when she's building up how bad she is, it's like, when did that happen? When did we see that, or when are we going to see that? Because we kind of really don't. It just feels like a very late rehash of what Sarandon was doing in the first one, where it's like, Sarandon doesn't really come into the first movie until the third act, where it might seem like it's tacked on, but then Sarandon came in and practically stole the movie, so it works still. But Rudolph here kind of doing this, and of course it's Maya Rudolph. She could have killed this. She could have really made this into something, but like I said, it feels like they barely used her, and she clearly was not given enough material, so we don't really get anything. Like, there's nothing really for Rudolph to even try to save, because there's nothing here at all, really. So, yeah, we'll get more into the climax in a bit, but, yeah, so this villain song really wasn't working for me, but in general, it felt like the first one's songs were more about, like, the feelings of the characters. Like, you felt like that's how the characters, like, really, really expressed themselves, and they were just, like, their own thing, where it's like, they didn't really have to be plot-moving, but they were memorable songs, and they were good songs, and they had really great numbers to go with them. Like, that number in the park in the first movie is huge and glorious, but here everything feels so watered down, and all the songs feel like exposition. Like, they're just sort of explaining the plot as it goes. Which, yeah, a lot of musicals do that, but, like I said, because the first one seemed to capture feelings in songs much more than plot before, it really sticks out here in a bad way. On top of the fact that the songs here are completely unmemorable. Apart from that Let It Glow bullshit, I can't really think of another lyric to even tell you. And there's a lot of songs in this. I don't remember the sound of any of them, or a lyric or anything like that. And I watched this movie last night, less than 24 hours ago. So, that's bullshit. Let's talk more about this Amy Adams going back and forth between good and evil thing. Obviously, Amy Adams has talent that goes beyond the realm. So, I feel like this would have been a great moment to really let her show off. But the movie itself and the way that it's made undermines her attempts to do this. Because there's a scene here that could have been awesome from an acting standpoint, where she's going good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, while she's talking to Morgan, just in and out. But the way they shoot this is she's here in front of the camera, and then Morgan is like right here, where the back of her head is like right in front of the camera. So the camera keeps spinning back and forth, where it's good Giselle, and then the camera turns, and then we go past Morgan's head, which is completely in the frame for a second, and then when we come back around, it's bad Giselle, and then we keep going back and forth. And so it's like, when we go past Morgan's head like that, it feels like there's obvious editing and cutting going on. And it's like, why do it that way when you can just leave the camera on Amy Adams and just watch her in real time go from good to bad and good to bad? Because I guarantee Amy Adams is capable of something like that. And like she'd be able to really play that actually convincingly. But like I said, the evil Giselle never feels convincing, and I feel like it's just the movie itself's problem. It's not an Amy Adams problem, because Amy Adams could have easily done this. Amy Adams could have really, really crushed this, but like it's just like they didn't give her anything to work with. They didn't give her stuff like that. They wouldn't let her do that, and the songs, which she would have normally crushed, you can't really tell because the songs are kind of shit and forgettable. So yeah, so there's just no feeling left. Like I'm sure like every review under the sun has already tackled the fact that the movie is well titled. So there's that. I guess the only other thing I can really talk about is they also do this thing where I was noticing that Dempsey didn't get a lot to do in the first movie, except to fall in love like he's in another romantic comedy. Like he's back in Maid of Honor or whatever that one was. But, but here it's like, okay, let's give Dempsey more to do. So now that they're like, after Giselle wishes for it, the town turns into like a live-action version of an animated Disney musical. Which, once again, is a good idea, but the execution is just way off all the time. You just don't get a magical vibe from any of this. You get a straight-to-Disney Plus vibe from this. So I'm not saying it feels as bad as that Amazon Cinderella movie with Pierce Brosnan, but it's close. I was recalling that, which is a really bad place to be. But I lost the thought I had. But I want to go into the climax. I probably lost that thought for a reason. If my brain was protecting itself. This was a case where I was going to the Dempsey thing. Shit. I should have forgotten it. The Dempsey thing is that now that we're in this, heightened, reality, this fairy tale-like reality now, Dempsey is like this sort of dragon slayer sort of hero type, but he keeps sort of failing at that. And this is something that I feel like should have been better than it is. It's trying to give Dempsey the chance to do what Marsden's doing in these movies. And Marsden's got something really special, just in general. I love James Marsden just in general, especially what he brings to these movies. I think he's my favorite part of probably both of these movies, with Susan Sarandon like right there with him for the first movie. But I don't know if it's that Dempsey's incapable of this, or if he's getting just as fucked over as like Amy Adams is, or Maya Rudolph is, where they're just not being given the right material to make this work. It's hard to say. But okay, so as far as the climax goes, this is one of those movies where I was talking about, like, Sarandon coming into the movie in the first movie feels very like, oh, here's a last minute conflict so that we can have a big climax. But then it just worked. It might be the best, third of the movie. But here, as we get more conflict, honestly, just the less that I cared. We get, like, within the climax, Morgan goes, like, under a sleeping spell. There's the prospect that Andalesia's about to, like, disappear and be destroyed. Like, the wand that Giselle's using breaks. They're, like, Nancy and Edward are, like, apart, like, because he's animated, because James Marsden is too busy to be here. and she's out here in the real world, and they can't get to each other. And like Maya Rudolph takes power, and Giselle is like slowly dying as she loses her power as this is happening. And I was just looking at every time one of these things happened, it was like this movie is almost 2 hours, and there's that conflict. I don't care. I don't care about that either. I don't care about this. I definitely don't care about that. I really don't care about this either. And that's just what the climax was. Just brand new things kept happening I just didn't give a shit about. For what felt like an eternity. It felt like a very, very long time. And then it finally had the mercy to end after an all too long epilogue. Like I said, wrapping up storylines that weren't even storylines, like seeing Morgan sitting with her jock boyfriend or whatever. And it's... jock boyfriend, by the way, is Maya Rudolph's son in the movie. That doesn't really matter. He said, like, one point he says, "Mom, stop!" There's no point. And it, yeah. So, as I said, imagine all the joy in the first movie just completely sucked out and just slammed onto Disney Plus, and that's what we get here. Hocus Pocus 2 was better than this, and that's dangerous territory to be in. So it's like Hocus Pocus 2 is starting to look good after this. So this is just really unfortunate. This didn't need to happen. It's annoying that when we talk about Enchanted now, it has to be the first one to differentiate. But maybe it won't have to be, because that's... I can honestly see this one being forgotten, especially since it's just on the streaming service. It's just like, oh yeah, there's that thing, and then you move on. Yeah, I have a hard time imagining people coming back to this one the way they do the first one. I feel like I'm talking about Hocus Pocus 2 again now. Where it's like, yeah, it's like, you know, you watch the first movie and then you match it up with this, and it's like, oh, is that going to become a thing? And it's like, nah. In the future, you'll probably watch the first movie, and you'll say, like, should we watch the second one? And then you all come to the conclusion, nah, we'll do something else. I think that's what this movie is destined for, and it deserves it. So, I think that's where I'm going to end these. So we still have a few more reviews to catch up on, and Violent Night's going to be coming out this weekend and stuff like that, and definitely going to be talking about the English soon, which I'm very excited to do. Watched a taste of some of the bad stuff recently, wash that taste out, and then we'll have something that's really worth talking about, because I just know the English is going to be amazing, and I have no problem saying that now without even having watched it yet. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most. So until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.